Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. For those of you that have come before, you'll remember my name is Carrie Willigan. I'm the Director of Career Services for the School of Business. And welcome you to our Professional Series. This is our consulting panel. We have a wonderful, diverse consulting panel set up for you. Professor Gretchen Hendricks is going to be our moderator today. If I can ask you to please turn your phones off. We want to give the panelists the respect they deserve. And make sure to ask questions because they're here to answer questions. They want to talk to me, they want to talk to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen right now.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I think this is my third round as moderator for one of the Ask the Professionals panels. I'm a huge supporter of career services. I actually was in Carrie Willigan's role 17 years ago at George Mason University in the School of Business. So I have a vested interest in making sure that our students are very educated about their career tracks and connecting with people from the business community for hopefully linking to internships and full-time jobs. So welcome. And thank you, panelists, for taking time out of, I know, busy schedules that we're all multitasking to come to George Mason today to be with us and share some information with our students. I personally was very excited that a consulting ATP was added this semester because very, very many of our students enter into consulting positions, and not many of them know exactly what that means to be a consultant. So we're going to be enlightened today on that. So what we're going to do is start off by having each panelist introduce themselves. They can tell us a little bit about obviously introduce their names, a little bit about their backgrounds, and maybe something of interest that they do specifically within their roles now. Thank you. And I'm just going to start and work this way, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, Kaz.
Okay. Do we know that these are working yet?
I tested them. I think they are.
Everybody hear me okay? All right. So happy to be here today. I'm Kaz DiMaggio. Currently, I am the CEO of a consulting firm called the Torrey Group. It's about 150 people, about $30 million in annual revenue. And what's different about us is we tend to focus on things that are fairly technical, though not necessarily IT. We're not an IT company. We're science and engineering based, do a lot of work with national defense and homeland security. A lot of that is focused on two things. One, protecting against weapons of mass destruction, and the other is bringing emerging technologies to fieldable capabilities, something that the government has often struggled to do. Personally, my background before starting the Torrey Group in early 2001, I've spent time consulting throughout most of my career in small, medium, and large-sized companies, and I also spent time in the government, including 4 years up on the Hill. So that's my background. I look forward to your questions.
Hello, my name is Kyle Richards. I work for Carney & Company. We are a CPA firm who serves exclusively the federal government. Our core primary lines of business are accounting, audit, and we've now started to branch out some into IT audits, cybersecurity. We also have some niche areas like what I work in, which is workforce development. My educational background, I have a PhD and master's degree from the University of Kansas, and kind of bounced around and found my way into consulting by sheer blind luck. So if any of you want to talk about that, I'd be happy to discuss that later. And looking back, some ways I might have been able to more effectively streamline my approach into consulting. Also could be happy to talk to you guys about workforce development. One of the things, in fact, that my team does for Carney & Company is develop career and force development roadmaps for places like the Department of Homeland Security, Air Force Financial Management. We've also built human capital strategies for the Air Force and for the Department of Homeland Security. So we do quite a bit in terms of trying to help people find their career and maximize their fullest potential as they progress along their chosen path. Look forward to talking to all of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario Ayala. I am a consultant with Bay First Solutions. We are an IT consulting firm. My primary area of work is supporting the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate, which DHS is largely my consulting background. Also, like Kyle, pretty kind of stumbled into consulting by accident. I kind of had a different career path lined up, and things just sort of changed, and one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I find myself a consultant. Very interesting career field, and happy to take your questions and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here with all of you today. My name is Iris Britt, and I am the president and CEO of Iris Britt Consulting. I specialize in fundraising and government contracting. So you may say, okay, what is that? Well, fundraising in terms of working with nonprofits around capital fundraising, annual giving, programs that will increase their services, that will allow money for them to increase their services. On the government contracting side, I work with government contractors who are small to medium-sized government contractors, and they're interested in getting bids from the federal government. And my role in helping them is to standardize processes, be it training in business development or proposal management. Like the others, I too kind of fell into the field. I have a master's degree in education, and certainly fundraising and government contracting wasn't in my purview early on. But I went and traveled a lot. My husband's in the Navy, so I traveled a lot around the world. And I ended up just doing the fundraising and the government contracting. And in both of those fields, you work long hours and you work very hard. And a few years ago, I said, if I'm going to work that hard, I might as well do it for myself. So I did. About 5 years ago, I opened up my own consulting company and started, just doing the marketing and the things you need to do to get yourself known. And so I'm looking forward to talking to all of you about how you can profit and do well and have the consulting field be rewarding for you. Oh, you got one?
Yep. Hi, I'm Sylvia Wendell. I'm a senior consultant for CGI Federal. If you notice, Sun 66, our building's right out in Fair Lakes. That's our main federal headquarters. CGI Federal, we're one of the main 3 players of the ERP systems for the government industry. The other players are SAP and Oracle. So we definitely have a huge product, and ERP is your accounting systems, your payroll systems, your contracting systems. I basically work as a subject matter expert for the company. Basically, I am the person they call when our account teams are in trouble. I kind of fell into consultant like the rest of the predecessors. I graduated from Mason back in 1999 from the New Century College. So I was one of the first attendees that went through 4 years of New Century College. I obtained my MBA in 2003 from University of Phoenix. And along the way, I've worked in many industries. I've worked for small companies. I've worked for hospitality industry. I have even worked for the circus. And I promise you, I wasn't a clown. I actually redid their financial systems. And throughout the way, I'm one of those, I get bored very easily. I like a challenge. I would automate myself out of a job. I get to the point where, hey, I could hit a button. This is so boring. Let me go look for the new challenge. And so consulting is perfect for me. And I'm even more of a typical consultant in my company, because most of the consultants in our company work directly on account teams. They have one client. They see them 5 days a week. I get spread out everywhere. It's, whatever the fire is on Monday morning, that's where I go. Next day, there's a new fire. I go on. And I love it. I love not having a routine. I love knowing where the next fire is. I love thinking about my problems every day, and it's great. So I look forward to talking to you more about consulting.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Toleb. I'm with a company called Evans Incorporated. Evans Incorporated is a women-owned small business. We're at about 75 people. Our founder is Sue Evans. She's been in the area for about 40 years. She started with Ford Motor Company, helping them. She was a computer scientist, and she started developing solutions that she would call human-centered. So, when you're working in a real technology field, heavy technical work, sometimes you forget about the human element, and there are actually people behind the machine. So that's what our company focuses on. My main client that I support is the Federal Aviation Administration. So I help their senior executives in strategic planning, workforce development, similar to probably what Kyle does, and just helping them to look at their organizations and the people behind it, not just the work that they do. My background, pretty diverse as well. Literally stumbled into consulting at a Washington Redskins game in the parking lot, so I can talk more about that later if you're interested. But similar, it's not something that you kind of start off doing necessarily in your career. I started at Capital One. I was there for about 5 years. I left to pursue my love of wedding and event planning. Decided that I didn't necessarily want to work every weekend for the rest of my life, so I came back to doing consulting, business development, and here I am. So any questions you guys have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Hello, I'm Brigida Toruño, and my company is Uno Translations and Communications. I'm the CEO and founder. I started the company 20 years ago, and we offer language translation in over 200 languages, so we help companies from nonprofits, trade associations, large companies, government, to put anything in writing, from websites, technical, marketing, into other languages, along with graphic design. And we do face-to-face interpretation and phone interpretation and some work with videos as well. And my background is I was in the corporate world. I worked for Fannie Mae a long time ago. And Freddie Mac. I actually went to Fannie Mae to start their translation unit. Spanish was my first language, and I feel like I have a huge passion for what I do. I was kind of born into this role, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you all very much. I found it quite interesting that the majority of you said you kind of fell into careers in consulting, and I can't help but wonder if that's not somewhat the nature of the job market in D.C., where you kind of go out and you start working and you find that there are just a lot of consulting opportunities and the career tracks sort of end up leading you in that direction. So another question I think that students frequently ask and are curious about is a typical day. And I want to think that there is no typical day for a consultant. And I'm sure of that, having done it myself. But I wonder if you could enlighten them or give them some insight into how your day proceeds. What are some of your main focuses in your day, your priorities, how you manage your time, things like that, that are important skills for students to be developing now and taking with them into the workforce, into these types of roles. And I will just let it go for whoever wants to volunteer to go first. If anybody's hot. Okay, great.
So I mentioned a little bit that I'm kind of typical from my company, where we have a small group. We're called a service line in our group. And basically our main goal is to support all our account teams. And when I said, every day you wake up, what's the fire for today? I do have like a main client that I usually help out with. But essentially I wake up, Monday morning, checking my email. What's the fire today? If there's nothing going on, and very loosely, I've got tasks that I prep up for, supporting our account teams, providing as much support as I can to them so that they're self-sufficient. They don't need to call me for every little fire. So my day is very unpredictable. It is for somebody who is not afraid that they're not billable the next day. I definitely know I can be billed, 120% of the time. Some of our consultants in our company have to be on an account team. They want to know they're going to the same client 5 days a week, and the majority of our company is that way. So I've been doing this, working with the product for over 13 years. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the aspects of their product, and I'm very familiar with a lot of our clients. So I always think about every day, hey, what's that challenge? And I know I'm not going to run out of work.
So a typical day for me, I'd like to also point out the different levels of consultants that are here. We have CEOs and, everywhere in between. I just want to point out that it's probably a different, the CEOs probably start their day different than I would. I am closer to operations, which is kind of what's known as being down in the trenches. You're down there with the work. You're down there with the analyst. The hands-on. You're seeing the projects on a daily basis. So for me, preparation is a lot of running to morning briefings, collecting information so that I can brief my direct supervisor up on what's going on, catching any. I work in cyber, so possibly watching the news, to see if there's any, what's out there for new attacks, new vulnerabilities, what's going on. Possibly going to another department to get, classified intelligence to bring back to the home office. So a lot of it for me is really just hands-on, just collecting information, compiling a report so that I can brief my supervisor, so that then he can go brief his supervisor and up the chain. So my day just requires a lot of planning. For my day started before I left work to come here. So I already made my task list of everything I have to hit. I know what's due, all the deadlines, all the timelines, who needs to speak to who tomorrow. So when I go in tomorrow at 6:30 a.m., I've already got a jump start on it. So for me, it's very hands-on, very tactical. Just collecting information, going, getting it, reporting it back up. So that is what it's like in the trenches on a day-to-day. Our more senior panelists probably have a different approach. Their day probably starts on a more strategic level, which I'll let the more senior team members chime in on that.
Just one note, Mario. Thank you for bringing that up. It's something that we've been trying to reinforce in the classroom as we educate students about consulting, that there are different levels that you move through. So we are blessed with some CEOs today, and that students, I hear from them a lot, what's your dream job? CEO. So if you could just add maybe when you're describing your day, because Mario brought up a good point, maybe what's not so typical about the CEO role and things that you might be involved in outside the work week or outside the typical kind of realm that's required beyond just the regular office hours, because I know there's a lot that goes into that role. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, I am the president and CEO, so that sounds so glamorous. But hey, I'm it. If I don't generate the business, I don't have a staff or I don't have anyone to do it for me. So I have to do it. So aside from the typical things that you do with the email and returning phone calls and having the to-do list from the day before, you work on client projects. And what I find is that beyond all of the things that you have to do, I have to generate new business. So for me, that means going out, that means marketing, that means involving myself in organizations. I'm a member of the Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce, and I serve as the co-chair of the Government Contracting Committee. So that helps promote my business as well as offers those folks that are there, to take advantage of my services, and also I can take advantage of theirs that might help my business to grow. So I think it's really important that when you are a sole proprietor, that you really have to keep yourself current. You always have to stay focused and stay current in your field. You have to market yourself, always look at your brand, not constantly, but revisit your business plan. And so for me, a typical day is just that, doing all of those things. And sometimes when I look at all of that, I say, boy, this is really exhausting. But it's rewarding for me because I realize it's something that I have a passion for and that I like doing, and I can set my own schedule. And if I want to do a project, if someone contacts me about a project, it's my decision as to whether or not I want to engage in that project. I don't have to do it because someone said, this is your project, you have to do it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kaz. Yes.
So there are different kinds of consulting firms, and the CEO models differ considerably based on what type. And I tend to group them, and I oversimplify this, into those that are sort of consultancy-based and those that are trying to develop a brand with a company name. And my experience is with the latter. In the startup phase, you literally are wearing all hats. You are not only providing the service to the clients and, as she said, going out initially and getting that work, but you're doing the accounting, the security, the facility work, everything. I mean, I can remember a blind broke and we needed the blinds because we had to have a classified meeting. I'm up on the chair fixing the blinds. I mean, you do absolutely everything. And the trick in making the transition to a company from a consultancy is to replace yourself in all roles. I spend a good deal of my time replacing myself in every aspect of my job, hiring people to do these other jobs and getting to a point where the clients aren't hiring me based on my earlier reputation, they're hiring my company. And when you get to that point, it's a terrific feeling because then it doesn't mean you can relax. I am on the clock 24/7 most days. But what it means is you can focus on vision, you can focus on teaching, you can focus on consulting at a higher level. And when you get to that point, consulting's pretty cool.
Great. Any other weigh-ins or typical days? Sure. Thanks, Kyle.
So I'm not at the CEO level. I'm a few levels from partner in the way my organization is structured, which I think is important to say also that every organization has a different structure. So one organization's senior consultant might be another organization's staff two, or it might be one step from the C-suite. The reason I wanted to chime in here is because my role with my company, there is no typical day. And that's, again, much as with falling into consulting, something I sort of fell into through my time working with my company, to the point where I am half-time at the Pentagon for the Air Force, which tends to be somewhat similar tasks within my area of expertise. And then half-time I report directly to either the COO of our company or the Chief Human Resources Officer, with no level of buffer between myself and them. What that means for any of you that might be familiar with the term Scrum is I live basically a chaotic Scrum life. And I like that. It appeals to my personality. And one thing about my company, Kearney, that's really awesome is they try to tailor your experience to the best that they can, understanding they are a business and they have to fill specific roles to what you prefer. And they know I like sort of living hair on fire and not being told, you're going to do this Monday, this Tuesday, this Wednesday, but rather, here's 5 projects, good luck. And then each day I wake up and start playing Tetris in my mind of how to prioritize those projects. For example, I left a proposal writing effort to come here to take this, and I was super thankful to do so because I needed a break. But proposals for probably a majority of our organizations take precedence over almost everything because that's how you generate revenue, and that's how the business grows and how you keep a job and how you move up and how you bring in more people. So, at that point, people were asking me for the usual odds and ends, which I kind of like. Hey, can you review this training? Hey, would you mind leading this community service initiative? Those types of things. It's, hey, look, yeah, but I've got to handle this proposal first. So I know it's sort of unusual for me to say, but when we get to sort of like maybe the advice or question and answer phase, I can talk about a few things that I think will help you empower yourself to more fully pursue and capture what you see as a style of day-to-day life, work-life balance that you would like. Because there are certain things you can do, and I was very lucky, but I did position myself to be in a position where I have this sort of ebb and flow, non-linear, non-structured work life. And for some people, probably some in this room, certainly all of you that have coworkers would find that maddening. I know Sylvia talked about, I just want to go to this job and I want to perform my task. Obviously, with Kearney & Company, we have a lot of accountants and a lot of audit types. They tend, and I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but they tend to be very type A. They want to come in, they want to take the list, and they want to knock it out because that's a big part of their career identity. We also have other roles where we don't do that. And seeking to find what works for you, what you like, I think is really critical to your long-term career happiness.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Yes, thank you.
I have something else to add. So where I am now with my company is I kind of split my time between what I'll call client delivery. So that's where I'm out supporting the FAA, but I'm also managing, as a program manager, one of our largest contracts from a company perspective. So I oversee the work of about 18 people, And so I have to work closely with our finance teams, our accounting teams, our contract teams to be good at numbers. I have to know spreadsheets. I have to be working directly with the client to make sure that the money's coming in. So even though I'm kind of a consultant, I'm also helping support my own company by being a program manager and actually managing the work as it's coming in and the finances. So that's another aspect of it too that blends, I think, some of the operations with some of the actual behind the scenes work of actually making sure you're getting the money from your client to make sure that your employees are able to bill. So that's another side of it too.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to open the floor to questions if anyone has them. Yes, Sam.
So a lot of you said that it wasn't your main career plan. You kind of fell into consulting. So how did that? What transpired there?
We want the juicy stories.
I'll give you nothing incredibly juicy besides 6 months in prison.
Ah, there you go. That trumps the Redskins game, but yeah.
Part of Sylvia's bio. So I have kind of a similar but not nearly as glamorous story. I went to college. This is going to date me. I went to college and graduated in 2000. And I came out. I came out, and I was sort of like, "What's next?" And I always knew, without getting into too long of a story, that I was going to go to the University of Kansas for either grad med or law because I'm a fifth-generation Kansas Jayhawk, so it's what my family does. And I ultimately settled on graduate school, got a master's degree, got all the way through the PhD program except for the dissertation. If you don't finish your dissertation in school, the statistics are like 83% never finish. I left saying, sure, I'll do it, and then I did nothing for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, I handled pretty much all of the oil and gas import and logistics for Florida. So I controlled everything from Fort Lauderdale to Gainesville to Jacksonville to Tampa. So that pretty much most of Florida, not Miami. So I was in basically logistics. Did that for a couple of years. Realized that I hated being in the oil industry. If you guys probably too young to remember, you certainly are. But in 2008, gas prices spiked along with the economy completely going in the tank. So you're paying $4 a gallon and nobody has a job. I realized I don't want to be a part of this in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to go back and complete my PhD. And by the time I get out, the economy will be better. It was not. And I can sincerely tell you that after I got my PhD, I graduated. I passed my defense in December of 2010, and then for the next 5 months I worked construction, building fence, doing stuff like that in Kansas because I could not find a job, and the jobs that I found were not inspiring, to say the least. And so this, I don't want to take away from the other panelists' time, but this steps into one of the first things I can say, which your network started the day you hit campus here, if not in high school, and I don't mean that in a cynical, I want to get to know you because you can help me later way, but you build your network by being an authentic person, by seeking opportunities, by forming real relationships, and by being caring. And I don't want to get too Pollyanna or have us all clap and sing Kumbaya, but when you do that, things will come around for you. And a case in point, a friend I made from the University of Nebraska, who used to be in the Big 12 with Kansas, and we had sort of a kind of friendly rivalry. They root for us in basketball or whatever. One friend I made in Tampa that I was a good friend with passed my resume along up here, and when I was in the depths of despair, actually, with, by the way, student loan people, they don't care if you don't have a job. They're like, hey, man, time to get a job because it's time to start paying back. And he said, I know you're bummed out. Let me pass this along. He passed it along to a retired colonel who's now a senior partner in our company, was my boss until he was promoted to senior partner. And he said, if you think he's a good dude, yeah, I'll give him a shot. Basically reviewed my resume, and I had kind of what he wanted, but not really because we're an accounting firm. And they're like, what is this OrgCom PhD junk? And he worked in oil and gas. What the heck? And so basically, on the recommendation of one of my friends from my network, he gave me a shot. And then I had to get there and prove myself. And I got my rear kicked for 3 or 4 months. For those of you that aren't aware, and this exists in most government agencies, acronyms abound. I try my best not to use them, and I find that I do anyways without even realizing it. And I sound like, the line from Good Morning Vietnam when he's rattling off acronyms. But trying to learn those when everyone around you is speaking basically a foreign language was challenging. I couldn't even communicate, which was my formal education. So trying to be able to communicate, first of all, before I could even do my job was a challenge. So I want to pass it along without that. It's kind of my story, but I really do think, the chance to enhance and build your network authentically. And I say that, I reinforce that over and over because people are smart. They will know if this is a glad-handed, chance for you to sort of lean out, hey, Kyle Richards, how you doing? Versus just trying to get to know people and knowing that, this isn't about tomorrow or next week. It could be 10 years from now, is what really matters.
Great story. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? We're obviously some very curious stories here.
So very similar. I ran into a friend of mine from high school at a high school reunion. It was my 15-year high school reunion about 4 or 5 years ago. And he is now going to be the soon-to-be president of our company. We just, we hadn't connected in a while. We were talking. I was in a different consulting firm. Didn't really like the mission or the culture at my old place that I was at. And he said, hey, you want to try working for the FAA? Again, no acronyms at all. Don't have an engineering background, but good at making relationships and talking to people. And so here I am, just based on the fact we both went to the same high school and we were friends then, but not super close. So you never know when someone you're going to cross paths with again could be the one that is now giving you a job. So just, be nice and just don't be a jerk to people.
Yeah. Good advice.
I actually came across consulting. So I should mention I am a Mason alum. I graduated from the School of Management ISOM program. But originally, I came to school and I was originally a computer science major. And then I took CS 112, I think is the first class, and I knew right there that is not for me and it should be banned strictly. But it was the hardest thing ever, and I just knew I was like, and I was worried because I'm like, well, what do I do? Because I don't see myself as an accountant. I don't know if I have what it takes to be a medical doctor, to go through like a pre-med. So I was thinking of my career in terms of like traditional jobs, accountant, financial analyst, engineer, and I wasn't sure because consulting is sort of a blend of a lot of skills, and so as I was thinking this through, I was trying to fit myself into these areas that I was just kind of like, I'm not quite sure if this is for me, but in the process, I came across the information systems degree. And I was like, oh, this is a nice blend of technology and management. And I was like, I think I can navigate this enough, to make it through school and find a proper job. Well, my first opportunity came, I started with a company, Booz Allen Hamilton, a big company, and, they are in the government consulting industry. And so I started out there and just kind of, started more in the administrative role, like, more like reception, office coordination, office management, ordering office supplies, making coffee, things like that. So, but then I started to, the more I did that job, I started to notice, areas where, hey, we can improve something here. And it could be something administrative, if we can get something done faster if we just, place these office supplies here versus here. They're kind of in the way here, and it'd be something small like that. And then those little things started to, you start to find little improvements, and then oh, hey, well then you identified this. Well, let's put you in charge of this, and it started to move on. My first government contracting consulting experience was when I left Booz Allen. I found an opportunity with Kinetic North America. I think they are a subsidiary. They're based out of England, but it was with Customs and Border Protection with Department of Homeland Security, and my role there was just they needed tier 1 help desk support, and I had enough technical background from my degree and everything to just come on and do this. I could get on the phone and open a ticket, and then let the more senior IT professionals handle, do the more technical as I learned. Well, that position, when I came onto the contract, they were like, oh, actually this position is gone. The government doesn't need it anymore. What they need is what's called a project coordinator. And what we need you to do is take the folks that are doing the engineering project and designing the network and putting in the firewalls and designing all these, router configurations and everything. We need someone that's going to transition all of this engineering work into operations. So make it work, the transition. Because right now what's happening is people are just throwing things over the fence, connecting it to the network, and then you have all these alarms. So we need someone to sort that out. And that sort of became my in to the project management field, but also consulting, because I had to interact with, department directors. I had to interact with senior consultants. I was put in charge of controlling the project budget. So I was tracking our staff members and how much they were burning against, the funding that was provided on that contract. And so I was providing recommendations back to our government lead of how we could, use our hours more efficiently, or when we're going to run out of money by this day, so it's time to start putting in the paperwork. And then that sort of introduced me to consulting. Not what I intended. I intended for a traditional job, engineering, accounting, science, and medical doctor, and I ended up in the consulting field.
Wonderful. Thank you. I have to know about the Ring. Did you really work for Ringling Brothers?
I did.
Okay, at the Tyson's location? Yeah. Remember that clown in the lobby? Because I also worked there.
Oh, really?
Oh,
What
yeah.
years?
It was very challenging to get on the elevator for me because I do not like clowns. Every morning I had to run by it. Yeah.
So I worked, the company that owned the Ringling Brothers and Disney on Ice, I think Motocross,
I think so, yeah.
Companies. It's Feld Entertainment. They used to be out based in Vienna. They actually just moved to Florida a few years ago. So I had the luxury of working for the CFO's office.
Oh, wow.
I was hired as a financial analyst, but it was actually kind of a more technical financial analyst. I learned SQL when I was there. My first job was to modify one of their Access databases. And it's so funny because I laughed. It took me 2 weeks to make one modification that probably I do in 2 seconds now. And I was so happy with myself, but everybody went home by Friday afternoon when I figured it out. But I love SQL now. And I had the luxury of working on the top floor. Wow. The top floor, it gets more colorful as you walk into the building. There are clown heads on the wall. And, budget office, we got to stay late at night. So I've heard about everybody's nightmares of clown heads. Yeah, worked with them. It's okay.
Right there with you.
They promise they don't bite you. And my nieces and nephews got to see as many circus shows and ice shows all those years of growing up because I didn't have kids and I needed some kid to go with me. So,
work obligations. Love it, love it.
Yeah, it brings a whole new definition of work obligations.
Yeah.
Additional.
Sure. Go ahead, Mario.
I just wanted to point out regarding consulting, when I said that, I wasn't sure. I was looking for more of a traditional, like the hard set jobs like accounting, engineering, things like that. I don't want to discourage. I don't want that to be a discouragement that you shouldn't pursue, an accounting career or anything like that. Because the term consulting, I would consider is sort of a catch-all. Consulting is sort of like this nexus space, it's sort of a catch-all. A lot of companies use the title consultant because it's just easy for people to understand. It's easy to structure your company around a consulting, hierarchy. But you can be an accountant, an accounting consultant. You could be a medical consultant, an IT consultant, financial consultant. My experience, I didn't want it to come off like I'm discouraging from traditional jobs because you can pursue a traditional degree and work in a traditional field and then leverage that experience to become a consultant in another field. Secondly, regarding consulting, how we fell into consulting, I would just like to also caveat for you and your experience, by the time you come out of school, the field that you may be consulting on may not exist right now. So just keep that in mind. Like the world is changing, technology is changing. So your expertise, your niche, may actually be in a field that doesn't even, you may be consulting in an area that just doesn't even exist right now. So just keep that in mind.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to kind of go to the practical side, because I know a lot of the students want to know, how do I find a job, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, right? They went to school, spending a lot of time, money, and effort on a degree. So if you could give them a little job search advice, it doesn't necessarily specifically have to be for a consulting job, but what specifically would you recommend? We had some networking advice, things like that, that they be involved in, be doing, be thinking about, to help them in their job search process.
So I have something that's been helpful as we've been bringing on some interns to our company. So it's kind of overwhelming when you start looking for a job, especially in this area. There's so many consulting firms. There's small, medium, large, and where do you even start? So the place that I've recommended is there's a lot of Washington Post, Washingtonian, a lot of organizations around here do kind of best places to work, or places that have great work-life balance, stuff like that. And you can usually get a list of those companies. You can do Google searches and stuff like that. But sometimes that'll narrow down at least places you might want to target, especially if they're being recognized in this area for certain things that they do well compared to others. It might help take that huge list down to a little smaller list, and it's a good place to start.
So my company comes and does the career fairs. I think we come about twice a year, something like that. We recruit from all the local Virginia schools, and we have what we call a MAP program, which is called a Momentum Apprentice Program, which we take all our college hires. Each class is about 30 or so, and basically what we do is instead of throwing you straight into the accounts, we basically extend your college career a little bit. So you get to learn the product in depth. You get to, if you get hired, you support these tickets. You'll get the account, tickets from our product, and you'll learn the product. You'll work together in solving this ticket. I think I get asked to interview college students at least probably once a month, and we have interviews all year round basically for college hires. But also, like Ashley said, you go look at Washingtonian, LinkedIn, like some of my fellow members have said. It's who you know. One of the smartest things a professor has ever taught me while here at Mason was, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's going to get you a job.
Absolutely. And I would say take advantage of volunteer opportunities, particularly with various nonprofits, United Way, Boys and Girls Clubs. Get familiar with your community, find a mentor. That is so important, and continuously build your relationships and network. It starts right now while you're in school. It's unbelievable how if you start building your relationships and start the networking process before you leave school, it gives you an edge when you get out into the work world. And you start searching for a job. And I would also say, I know she mentioned the Washington Business Journal, but there are also other organizations. As I had mentioned, I think earlier in the program, there are chambers of commerce who need interns. Also, if you are interested in your particular field, you may want to seek an internship with that field, with that particular organization, so that when you get out, they will know your work and offer you a job. That has happened. I worked for Hampton University for 5 years as a fundraiser. I raised $200 million, and that wasn't what I went to school for, as I said before. But what I found was that it was through that fundraising effort and seeing the students, because I worked in the business school at Hampton, seeing the students go to a Goldman Sachs or a Deloitte & Touche or Merrill Lynch, and having those internships, they would know when they were finished with their internship that they may have the opportunity to work there. So I would definitely follow some of those routes in searching for a job.
To add to this a little bit, first of all, unlike when Kyle, as he referred earlier, and when I got out of school, you guys are getting out at a great time. Companies are really struggling to hire good people right now, and that's going to last a few years. So, you're coming out at a good time. One of the things that I would highly recommend, though, even in this environment, is figure out a way to differentiate yourself. You don't want to look like everybody else. So what is it? I mean, if you're going to go into consulting, a couple of things are must-haves. You must be able to show that you can think analytically and that you can communicate both orally and in writing. Then beyond that, what do you have? Do you have some special skill? Do you have a technical background? What can you add to that to set yourself apart? And then the other thing I would say is, because you're coming out in a better economy, you'll have more choices typically. And one of the factors that you should look at is whether you want to come out in a small, a medium, or a large company environment, because they are extremely different. If you go into a large environment, the benefit is they've got a lot of resources to train you and bring you into programs. On the negative side, you can be a number, you can be part of a factory, and they'll burn you out, and they'll keep those who make it through that process, and the rest of you are going somewhere else. In a small environment, you get exposure to everything, and it's much more challenging to keep your head above water, but you can become a subject matter expert a little bit faster, perhaps. Compensation is not necessarily the same, though, in a small company as it is a big one. So there are a lot of things there to take a look at with regard to size of the company, because then you can look at, okay, do I want to look at the Boozes of the world, or do I want to look at smaller companies as I conduct my search?
Great. I agree with everything that this great panel has talked about already. For us, in terms of consultants, we look for linguists. So we look for people who are bilingual or trilingual and are proficient in that language, preferably people that have degrees in another language. But because we work with, we make sure that we're matching our clients' needs to our linguist. We also want to see that the linguist has a university degree, and maybe it's engineering, or maybe it's business administration, or a number of other types of degrees where we can. So we look at to make sure that you are proficient, and that there's also a specialization that we can find with our linguists. But we also hire project managers, so for that we don't necessarily need someone who speaks another language, and also program managers.
Great.
I just wanted to just piggyback on the point that Kyle made earlier, and it's resonated with the other panelists as well. And this is the fact of building and taking care of your relationships. And I'll give you a perfect example right now of how small the consulting world is, the consulting community. Coming to this panel, I didn't know who I was going to meet today. So sitting on the panel, Mr. DiMaggio here, he recognized my company. He told me he knows my CEO. He also knows my program director at DHS S&T. Kyle with Carney & Company, I recognized the company. I was like, hey, your company just hired my wife. So this is how small the consulting world is. So taking care of your relationships, and when I mean taking care of them, like Kyle expressed, not in the sense of like, hey, how can I use you? How can you help me? How can I get how can I leverage you to help me get ahead? But really taking care of more like the approach of, hey, how can I add value to what you're doing? And in turn, somehow we help each other out. But I'm adding value to what you're doing. You take care of your relationship, because you never know who you're going to run into, and you're never going to know who's going to circle back around in your life. So amongst yourselves, some of you may be each other's bosses one day. Some of you may work with some of the companies that are up here. So you just never know who you're going to run into or who's going to circle back around. Just keep that in mind. Just take it back on what Kyle said.
Yeah, we're Facebook friends, Brigida and I, and we haven't seen each other in probably, 8 years, but my son's been really sick, and she's like, how's he doing? You guys just got out of the hospital, right? So it's like, it's amazing how small this area really is when it comes to this type of work.
And I don't want to tell you, Mario, but I think my husband worked with you at CBP. Yep.
Oh, that's sweet.
But I like to add to the network. So I never got to the more boring part of my career is that I worked for a State Department for another corporate consulting company called Mill. And what we did was IVMV, which is testing the software of my current company, Momentum, CGI. And, usually it's kind of, when you're testing another company's software, it gets a little vicious because you're breaking their software and you're complaining about it. And it really, sometimes you can build enemies. But I was always one of those ones who really, I was friends with everybody. And, 8 years down the line, I was looking at my career. I'm like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to manage. There's nowhere for me to go. And we can't outrightly recruit people. But somebody in the back said, hey, let's take Sylvia over to the company. They talked me into it, and this is where I am. So, and, when you go to networking events, you never know who you see 10 years down the line. I mean, there's people I haven't worked with. They've left 3 companies later. They're all of a sudden my coworker. And some people are a little bit more challenging to work with, but still maintaining the professionalism with them, it pays back in spades.
Thank you all very much. Again, I'm going to open it up for any questions from the audience. Anything bubbling up that they haven't gotten to that you're curious about? You want to save that for the one-on-ones? Well, maybe we could dive into just piggybacking on the job search idea, maybe talking a little bit about skill sets and maybe a little insight into, Sylvie mentioned interviewing happening, insight into the types of interview questions that might be expected out there. What would the interview process be like, and what skills do you think that employers are really seeking in today's college graduates? We do a lot of soft skill building in the School of Business. It's very important to us, so I want you to re-emphasize that. No.
I'll actually start.
Sure.
So it obviously seems like it's almost a platitude to say, oh, well, you should be a good communicator. But I mean, you're talking about a CEO and president. All of us in some form or another have mentioned it, talking about how important it is. Speaking only for my company at this point, I can tell you that we hire a whole bunch of primarily accountants and auditors who come right out of business school. And sometimes, and I'm glad to hear the emphasis on soft skills, sometimes, and I'm not trying to overgeneralize, accountants and auditors tend to be a bit more reticent. They tend to be a bit more introverted. They are more task-oriented than people-oriented, so to speak. So I know that can sometimes be a challenge. And when you're an accountant consultant, it's fine. I'll give you an example. My dad is a CPA. He had the unfortunate visage of having his eyebrows go like this, so all my friends to this day are terrified of him, even though he's 77. He's a CPA. He's not a big communicator. He's actually dead opposite from me. I got most of this from my mom, my ability to speak publicly. But, the fact is he doesn't have to be, because he's mostly grinding out tax returns. And this didn't matter when he worked at Price Waterhouse before they were even Price Waterhouse Cooper, as a junior VP when there was like 7,000 of them, or a partner at BDO Seidman, which is primarily a southern firm, or a small company he works for in Iowa, Kansas, which is a town of 3,000 people. Don't really need it. You just do the work, do a good job, make basic communication. In consulting, communication is half of it. I don't care if you're the best accountant in the world, unless there's a slot for you to be a subject matter expert. And I don't mean this like in your way, where you're out there in the fold, but basically to go off and just grind numbers. You're going to have to deliver them, present to people, talk, communicate. Communication is so important. Soft skills are so important. And so I would encourage you, while you're in school, to challenge yourself to the extent that you can in terms of seeking out opportunities, maybe to present on a junior panel. Take a communication class. I know everyone hates public speaking 101 or whatever. I know, because I taught it for several years in grad school and faced the same looks beginning of every semester. But take a communication class. It doesn't even have to be public speaking. It can be nonverbal. That's a lot of fun, actually, and you can learn a lot, since most studies say 60 or plus % of communication is done nonverbally and almost instantaneously when you meet someone. Take a philosophy course. You might be interested and surprised by how it challenges the way you think and helps you expand your mindset without getting into like the 60s type, free your mind, dude. Thinking differently is so huge in consulting. You know, obviously there'll be times where you have a rote process or approach to conducting work. And I'm not going to lie to you, when you guys come out, most of you will come in and you'll have somewhat repetitive tasks. Not all of you, but that's the nature of the beast. You come in and you are staff one. You know, you're there to do rank and file work, but that's where you start putting yourself out there. And like he said, find a way to differentiate yourself. Maximize your opportunities without biting off more than you can chew. I noticed that, I think it was Ashley does a lot of stuff for her community service for her company. I have been the chair of Carney & Company's Community Service Committee for the last 6 years. That gave me a chance to get out and meet a whole bunch of people, expand my network, develop skills, project management because we host events, leadership, team building, that kind of stuff. Every time I saw an opportunity that I didn't think would impact my ability to do my job, because doing your job well is, of course, job number one, I would take that on. It gave me a chance to get to know more people and meet more people. And expand on my capabilities and to distinguish myself to the point now where I have this weird hybrid role where I'm half-time client-facing and half-time focusing purely on trying to energize our company. So that maybe kind of flowed back and forth a little bit, but I hope that kind of expounded upon the need and the essential nature of trying to distinguish yourself, thinking differently, and communication.
Wonderful.
And if I could add to that again, you know, communication and the ability to think analytically is absolutely key no matter where you go. Now, if you come into a firm like ours, having some sort of science or technical background in addition to that, having those kind of courses to augment the business background or the policy background is what we're looking for. But, you know, when I say demonstrate your ability to think analytically, the rap on you guys, and you guys meaning everybody of your generation, is you think too softly. You don't really have open minds. You don't know how to start a problem and break it down and throw away your biases in the way you look at something. And you've got to figure out, if you want to work for a serious consulting company, you've got to figure out how to get yourself out of that mode. You've got to figure out how to separate yourself from the caricature that goes with your generation. And I hate to sound like the old fart on the stage here, but that is the rap you guys have, and you can separate yourself from that. We do it very well. We hire a lot of people right out of school, and they're very successful, but they are self-starters, and they have demonstrated that they can take a complex problem and break it down and keep their biases at the door.
Great advice.
Piggybacking on that, you know, speaking to the soft skills and pursuing a job, you know, there's I don't know how many avenues, millions of avenues out there for looking for work. You have networking, you have social media, you have the career builder, the monsters, the Indeeds, all of that. You know, and that's all fine. And, you know, piggybacking, you know, you need technical skills, you need scientific background, communication is key and everything. But two things that I'm going to offer the advice. You know, either pursuing new employment or your current employment, but that you will need as a consultant is one, is to be authentic with people. If you don't know something, you know, it's okay not to know. You're not expected to know everything. You're expected to know how to find the answer, right? You know, run it down, but be authentic. Many people, they don't have to be very senior people, but many people can tell when you're just blowing smoke at them. You know, they can tell when you're just, you know, making it shiny for them, and they'll just see right through all that. Using the jargon, like, you know, oh, I'm a cyber ninja, you know, or something like that. The other thing is, I would say, you know, people's skill sets, they exist on a spectrum. You can be either very technical, kind of technical, not really technical, very management-oriented, not kind of middle management, a little bit of both. People's skill sets exist on a spectrum. What does not exist on a spectrum is integrity. You have that or you don't. And that is probably one of the most valuable things in consulting, because as consultants, we already give off the vibe of, like, you know, kind of slick talking, trying to get contracts, trying to get money. Oh, we charge so much. What'd you do? You know, what does it mean to a consultant? I'll tell you. Hey, give me your watch. I'll tell you what time it is. That's a consultant, right? That's kind of the rep that, you know. So having integrity, following through on your deliverables, you know, being honest with your client, being honest with yourself, you know, not selling yourself short, but not overselling yourself on, you know, where you're going to come up short. That's very valuable. And I think sometimes in an effort to try to get ahead, people kind of, they sacrifice their integrity, their authenticity to gain salary, to gain position, to get, you're going to run into all kinds of people. Those people are out there, but eventually it catches up with you. So be authentic, keep your integrity, and protect your reputation. There's a lot of things out there like social media that employers do look at it, and you come to the interview, you bring your resume. Well, this is the best version of yourself. In the interview, wow, this person's awesome. This is a model citizen right here. But that's what your resume is supposed to do. It's supposed to paint you in that light, your best light, right? But if an employer goes to your social media and you're on there, doing all kinds of things, controversial parties and whatever you're doing on social media, they could look at that and just be like, well, my 360 analysis of this person is just kind of like, hey, they look good on paper, but their overall person may not fit well with this company and with our vision and what our mission and what we're trying to represent may not fit well. So take care of your reputation. It takes a long time to build a solid reputation. It takes years, to be known in the industry, to be respected, and it only takes seconds to destroy it all. So protect those things.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that, the way you present yourself as well. I mean, some of the best advice I got was dress for the job you want to have, not the job you used to have. So keep that in mind. The guy or girl that comes in a suit every day, not that you have to do that, but that also kind of sets you apart from the person that just wears jeans because you're allowed to. So the way you present yourself is really important.
And I would also say that you really pay attention to staying focused and also how you view change. Most of us like change if we make the change. So there's always going to be change. I have a saying, if you're not riding the waves of change, you're going to find yourself beneath it. So just expect that there will be change constantly, and just, try to be more flexible. Include that in your repertoire of all the things that the panelists have said.
Yeah, and for us, I see my business as a humanitarian work that we're doing in terms of helping people that don't speak the language hear that they can understand what's happening, or because companies are looking for global expansion. And so for us, along those lines, we have certain guiding principles, and I think it's good for when you're looking for a job to keep those different things in mind and to get to know the company that you're going to interview with, because some of us have different intentions in terms of our overall vision for the company. For us, like what was mentioned, integrity, I think that's so important. We're looking for someone that has very high integrity and somebody who has empathy, someone who is looking at accuracy, that's transparent, which goes back to, to being authentic. And then that's dedication, someone who's dedicated to the work that they'll be doing for us.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the panel portion here. We do have time for networking, and I want to make sure we do give ample time because some students might have a 4:30 p.m. class. So I want to thank you, each one of the panelists, for your advice and recommendations today and for taking time to join us. Round of applause. So please feel free to hang around. The panelists will be staying with us for a bit if you have those one-on-one questions that I mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. I laughed when she said dress for the job you want to have, and I realized that we have almost the exact same outfit. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. CEO.
Wayne and Gregor twins.
Should I communicate that with these guys? Yeah, if you want.
Well, when I heard you say Connecticut, I bet you
I know this guy.
I bet you left Connecticut when they got bought by.
It's super easy to remember. It's just first out, last, the Carney.
I think
Go through the portal, but so interested in this is another one of those. So before they got like 2 years into working, maybe a year. I didn't know. I had like 3 or 4 friends out there. That's about it. I mostly my now wife and girlfriend was finishing school. I saw this guy at all the company events. I have no idea. I'm not trying to say that to appeal. I saw this guy.
But then he went over to
I was a fraternity guy, I played college rugby, stuff like I walked up to him, okay, man, it's 2 o'clock on Friday. What happened here? You seem like a guy who likes to party. So I guess we went down, we were there until like 9 o'clock. And then I was like, no, actually, don't think I caught your name. And he's like, yeah, Brendan Carter. He's one of my best friends. So the youngest son, I bet I didn't know, I think probably some people were really thought it was a political move. But, just goes to show, I've got to do so many cool things with him, like Sweet Redskins games, playing golf tournaments, by the way. You guys don't play golf, start learning if you come to us. So that's what I'm saying, like, we pay for you to play. So if you represent
He's a walkie-talkie geek. He lives it. He's like, you don't wake up the podcast.
I'm not a two. But I mean, like we. So the point is, like, I'll kick you over.
Mario, thank you so much again. I really like some of the points that you mentioned about the soft skills.
So I can obviously give you a leg up. I'm not going through those standard. Hi, thank you. By the way, I will say, we just had our interview. One of them, at least, last Friday. So I don't know if it's too late or not. It's still trying to jump there. Also, right now, I know as of they always open more in the spring. Like, they don't want to overextend because then it's like, it's no good for you guys, right? You get a job, you're excited, you got an internship, we have to make a profit. So now what we do, you're going to learn transactional federal. I'll do that. When you guys come to me and I teach you how to write, what you can do.
Right. Like now there's
No actual talent. But I will say, my boss told me, it's such a dumb thing. You don't know what you don't know.
you
Sort of like in risk management, the unknown unknowns, risk you don't know.
and the things you want to.
Kind of the same thing.
Thank you again.
That was a good job.
Yeah.
Good job. You realize that you didn't know what you don't know. Going to check this.
The 9 to 5 regular.
Pause in the tower agreement. Great, you have a science background, you think that a little bit. I gotta get in your job. Learn on the job. But I will say, feel free.
Yes, you do a very good job being able to relay that message. And I'm here with you.
I'm not gonna say nobody cares. Where that starts to matter is if you're going to 5,000 people.
Yes.
Which, by the way, is also about who you know. Did you go to the right school?
Like, no,
But I won't take it.
well, I won't take up too much time with you. I was sitting in the audience because I wanted to hear your
One guy went to Penn State or something, and they mercilessly mocked anybody gay or whatever. Just the culture. But the point is, like, you know what I mean? Like, I graduated with 3.5 in undergrad. Grad school's kind of been late. I went like 3.72, 3.81. 3.81 my PhD. Does he really care about the grades? And like you said, and being personal. I mean, that's always a good thing to have, right? I mean, you get into the twos and that might raise it. I don't think you guys are below a 3, but if you are, just don't pay for GPA for the rest of it. Just put your degree. I would love to. Auto response. Yeah, so interning doesn't work out this coming summer of 19, that doesn't mean you can't come work for us. Get an internship somewhere, see what you want to do. We hire people that don't intern at the same time. It's just, obviously, like I said, it's like, I mean, if you're an intern and they like you, it's basically, do you want a job? I will tell you, one of my favorite interns last summer, Sharon Garcha, who was in the alumni here. They offered her, she ended her internship, she was the last one to leave. She left on like August 29th. They offered her on like the day after Labor Day. And she accepted like mid-September, emailed me, was like, hey Kyle, I'm going to start working for Carney in January. She was in December. So, you know, I mean, that was very cool. She's there now. We always welcome anybody to come check us out. A lot of this stuff we talk about. Our main office is our corporate headquarters is on 2nd Street in Alexandria. It's like a block from 10th Street Metro. I live like 0.7 miles from not in Old Town, but just but I mean, talk about this is work, dude. This is an awesome company for careers and lifestyle. Like, I'm actually getting ready to go home and I'm not making the shoot. Basically, I'm getting ready to start on a section of the proposal that I left for later because I know it well. That is all about how can you improve this so you retain your people. A big part of that is I talk about all the awards we've won in the last 10 years. What a ton. Best place to work. Washington Business Journal, best in Virginia, best places to work. All of these things we've won over and over and over. That's always a good sign, you know, if that's what you're looking for. And I will say, I don't look down on Big Four. I think what Kai said is exactly right. You tend to be a number there. But one thing I can tell you is I don't begrudge people that want to work at Big Four because you have the name behind you. If you do good work, you can go anywhere because you're like, where's your before? I worked at Deloitte. They're like, okay, so they've been in the big leagues. Yeah, you've been in the big leagues, so to speak. So, you know, there's what we said, and I will tell you, they do. These things are Deloitte, Big Four, they shoot those. What I see more frequently is us, they work for a couple of years, then they jump over there, you see if they like Big Four, and then a lot of times we call them Carney Good Mornings, they come back. Yeah, but they go just yeah. They're good. It's such a good company. We've had a couple guys go over to there. They seem to like it. It's not. It's a big business, but it's not as aggressive as our culture. We focus on working. In fact, with our HR director, I built a training called the Carney Way, which basically talks about the culture. It's for supervisors to make sure that they're perpetuating the culture. And as these people come in, you don't apply Big Four standards. You have to honor culture. People first. So her and I teach it. She's so her and I, like, we went, I mean, to get ready for this training, she went to the COO and was like, Kyle and I want to go to Disney Institute and learn customer service. They sent us to Disney. Which, I mean, if you want to know customer service. They do it because they monetize everything, but they are the best in the world. So anyway, I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but seriously email me. Oh, no, I'm good. I told her about 4:30 I'm going to push out because I need to get some writing. Yeah, I'd love it if you guys do. No, I mean, it's okay, so as long as you're I come from pretty scheduled. First of all, you're not you know what I'm saying? Like, no PhDs coming to staff. So that's going to be okay. You have a management experience, right? So I will say biotech. don't expect to make like that middle management. So I came in at we've now restructured. Which was level 3. So I was level 3 out of 8 with a PhD, but they're basically like your previous work experience is good, you had something, would not hire you with no work experience. That doesn't mean you have to have gone and got a job. You went all the way through, just get an internship or something. Otherwise, having a job, it's not happening. And my boss basically called off the job, here's the salary range I'm offering. $10,000 each. You can take any number on that continuum, but you need to understand my expectations go up. Max. But it was worth it because the farther up the ladder you get quicker, that impacts everything thereafter. But I will say, like, try to find ways where you don't want to teach. You don't want to teach. Yeah, I never wanted to. I will say, if you ever, part of my PhD program, I still worked on 2 papers. I mean, lots. But that's another thing. Hey, look, I know my arena. I've been published. Any questions? It can. The only thing again is I don't think you can tell the because you have 3,500 hours. Now that thing is kind of a joke. There's ways to come there. For example, when I told you guys I did construction work, I was building fence. I wasn't managing a project, man. I was out there digging dirt, building fences. It was one of my fence meetings. So you're a gopher. You're a gopher. Yeah. Called gophers because it's gopher. I applied for it. I didn't quite have enough time. So I used stuff from back when I was in logistics and I used stuff from consulting. I called my buddy. If they call you, here's what I did. Sounds good. So I can just, and I will tell you, just applying for it took me like 4 months. You get 36 hours of 40 hours of continuing education. Then you have to show 3,500 hours. You have to show across 5 project management areas, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, control. And it has to be in similar percentages. It doesn't have to be exactly factoring, but they see the project. They see a project like this, right? So if you put 70% of the time initiating, you might get this. So you need to spread out so it's like 14, 23, 31, 21. Yeah, I wouldn't overload it. I don't know if you I wouldn't overload on I don't know if it'll necessarily hurt. I just want to be careful about overload. There's coming with a whole bunch of other and the first thing you're saying, Richards. So I would focus on that. I know we keep recording, but being authentic is a big part, right? Look, I told my old boss, now senior partner, like, dude, just give me a chance. The first 3 months he drilled me. He's told me. He doesn't. I mean, like, I'm hesitant to talk about it. Last year, my company created an award last year.